Oh, lovely. More nonsense coming out of Games Workshop. Bloody idiots. Warhammer 40,000 is slightly more women in it now, and the neckbeards aren't happy. No, that's not why. But of course, this is PC Gamer, so of course they're not going to give like an accurate representation of what people are annoyed about. There are women in Warhammer. You know, you've got the sororitas, you've got the nuns with guns. You know, you've got all of them. There are women in Warhammer, but not in the custodies, and that's always the way it's been. Right, you've added women to Warhammer. People weren't that unhappy about it. A lot of people like the nuns with guns. If you've seen them, they go hard. I like them, right? But the fact is, you're now rewriting history. You can add a new chapter. You can do all of that stuff. You've done it before. People didn't care, right? Basically, you know, some of the female like space marines. Well, they're not. I know technically they're not space marines, but shut up, right? Basically, people play them. They're part of the meta. People enjoy them, right? A lot of people like the sororitas and all that, but the reason people are annoyed is you've changed the history of the game. You went in to make a lore change to the established history of the game to appease people who don't even play the bloody game. Right? That's why people are annoyed. So basically now again, it's the media, it's in the, you know, Scorpion and the Frog, it's in their nature, right? But still, let's just clarify that from the get-go. Since Warhammer 40,000's 10th edition was released last year, each of the Wargames factions has been getting the traditional rules refresh in the form of a new codex book. The latest deals with the Adeptus Custodes, genetically engineered bodyguards of the Emperor so gigantic they make Space Marines look weedy. That's the Custodes guard the Emperor, so they're like the best of the best of the best of the best. That's just the way it is. Where was I? They also happen to be Henry Cavill's army of choice, because bloody course. There are 10,000 of them, and in the past, they've only ever been depicted as men. Not depicted as men. They've only ever been men. It's in the lore. They're men. Space Marines are men. Shut up. Right. In this latest iteration, Shock Horror, at least two of the Custodes are women, which was never the case. That's never been the case. Most players seem to have responded to this by shrugging and getting back to arguing about the new rules, but there's always a vocal minority who go on a tear. Always a vocal minority who go on a tear, written by PC Gamer. With no sense of self-awareness. The Mail Online ran a typically subtle and understated headline that declared it's woke hammer, and the meme community Grimdank has declared posts about femme stories will only be allowed for 1 week before they join. Before they join female Space Marine posts as a banned topic. Games Workshop's official response is a tweet that says, in regards to female custodians, there have always been female custodians. No, there isn't. People are even citing up all the old lore, going way, 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 way back in them. There's never been female custodians. They're just adding that in now, just as, you know, virtue signaling brownie points. That's all it is. They're basically saying, oh yeah, that lore that you all know, like, that's the problem is, a lot of people, like, the lore in Warhammer is expansive. It is a big, dirty, fat pile of lore. And it's forever shifting and changing, and there's always arguments about what's canon, what isn't canon. But the problem is there are certain things that have been, this is canon, this is part of the lore. But if you're going back and rewriting all of that, like, then it throws all of it into question. And like, for example, it's like, oh, the Emperor, oh no, it wasn't Horus Lupercal that did it, and it's like, was it? Who is it this week then? Like, that's the problem. See, when you start messing around with established lore, it throws everything else into question. What's the point in learning the lore if, like, a year down the line, you're going to change it all? Like, what's the point? Because the big draw, like, for me, I don't play the game, but I like the figurines and I like the lore. That's what I like, right? I like painting the minis. I haven't done it in a wee while, but I did finally paint my Black Templar army, but I've got tons of other stuff that I've not painted yet. I've got my Blood Bowl team, I've got Corn Raiders, I've got a Helldrake that I'm halfway through, which I paint for a few hours at a time, and then I need to take a break for like a week. A Helldrake's of it. It's going to look banging when it's done, but like it's a really difficult thing to paint properly. Right, but like the lore is one of the biggest draws that people really enjoy. Right, that's what people like. However, what's the point in going in and learning the lore if like a year down the line you might change it? Like, it throws everything into question, and it's like, oh, do you want to learn the lore? Well, like, not really, because it changes all the fucking time. You know, like a university textbook. Right, that's the problem. That's the problem that I have. What's the point in learning all of the lore if you're just going to change it? Since the first of the 10,000 were created, it's nonsense. Is this a retcon? Yep, and it won't be the last. Yes, he is a retcon. It is a retcon. Is it retcon also known as changing the lore? Now, there's some things that definitely should be retconned, like, for example, Alien 3 and onwards. Like, those were terrible and they should absolutely be retconned. But, however, male custodies, like, no, it should not be retconned. That's always been the case. Because, again, there are women in Warhammer. You can play as them. Right? There's a shop, like, a few streets away where you can go and buy female armies and stuff like that. The sororitas, right? It's just, honestly, it's just complete nonsense. Warhammer 40,000 has had fluid lore right from the start. For a bunch of different parts, yes, it has. However, there are certain things that are established lore. Like, it's always been Horus Lupercal that took down the Emperor. Technically, that's going to cause that's you didn't take him down. The Emperor won, actually. Yeah, alright. Get turned into a fucking vegetable where you have to fucking sacrifice like 10,000 Moonrune people a day to keep him alive. It's not a win, if you ask me. I'm a loyalist. Calm down. Don't worry. So many. There's going to be so many absolute heresy comments in the chat for me saying that. But anyway, the original custodian guards were depicted as shirtless hunks who never leave Earth, a long way from the heavily armoured, galaxy-spanning golden gods they became, to say nothing of tweaks to the 40k canon, like ditching half Eldar Space Marines and rewriting the Horus Heresy from a short story a handful of pages long to a series of 60-plus novels. Like I said, like, the lore is massive and expansive, and yet some of it is fluid, some of it is not. Right, it's not fluid, and you've changed a very, very important part of it, and it's not even for it's, to help with the storytelling narrative. It's not, like, the reason you changed it, like, people, see if you change the lore, but it's like, oh no, we have a big plan in future for where we want to take this character or something, then yeah, okay, I get that. You're doing it because you're like, we feel if we do this, we'll be able to create a much better story. That's fine, but we all know why you did this. It was virtue signaling nonsense. That's why you did it. You didn't do it for any other reason. Like, we're annoyed at the reason you changed the lore. Yeah, lore changes happen, and we're fine with it as long as it's for a good reason. This is not a good reason. It's virtue signaling nonsense. The Adeptus Custodes aren't 40k's only genetically engineered super soldiers, of course. The setting's flagship faction are the Space Marines, who are created differently. Where Custodes are enhanced via a unique process begun when they're infants, Space Marines begin being grafted with a gene seed when they're on the verge of puberty. And while the explanation that Space Marine gene seeds are keyed to male hormones and tissue types goes back away, it's not the real reason GameStop made a whole army of dudes who are men. As Games Workshop's former head of IP, Alan Merritt, once explained on Facebook, the reason there aren't female Space Marines has nothing to do with lore or background or character of Marines. It is to do with the simple logistics of making miniatures and selling miniatures. That's nonsense. You've done the sororitas. I've seen them. Right? I haven't seen them painted, though. But also, for anyone that's wondering, my army is Black Templars, because obviously. In the 1980s, fuck the Codex Astartes. Rules are for gimps. All that matters is that you love the Emperor and purge the Xenos. That's all we need. Look at all of you with your fucking rules. Anytime the Inquisition comes out and visit us, we fucking stick them in the airlock. Imagine obeying the Codex Astartes, scrubs. In the 1980s, Games Workshop sold miniatures in sets called blister packs, and as Merritt explained, the intention was that upwards of 25% of all models would be female. That didn't last because retailers kept complaining to us that customers weren't buying the female models, and we could not include any in their restocks. So basically nobody was interested in the product. How about that? By the time Warhammer 40,000 was designed, Games Workshop made sure its poster boys were, well, boys, to ensure they'd sell. There are these things called target markets. I'll teach you capitalism, Games Workshop. I'll teach you how to do it. I'll especially teach you about things like company reputation. Games Workshop are far too fucking litigious when it comes to their IP, especially when literally 50% of their entire lore and everything, like, you ripped off Dune, you ripped off Frank Herbert, like, massively, and you've got the cheek to be fucking litigious over people like Arch Warhammer because he had the word Warhammer in the title of his YouTube videos because he talks about Warhammer and everything. Or even, who was that guy that actually made the Astartes, like, animation? You went after him at first as well. Games Workshop are so fucking litigious for a bunch of people that robbed 50% of their lore from another guy. Like, God Emperor, Emperor's Legions, Lasguns, all that stuff, by the way, is all from Dune. Like, any Warhammer fan, like, knows that, though, but still. All the background fluff about why there are only male Marines is there to justify a commercial logistics issue. And even if that was the case, that was a very, very long time ago, and it became established lore. It became established, confirmed lore, right? No one in Warhammer's going to turn around and go, there are no female Space Marines because people weren't buying them. That's not established lore, right? Okay, you may have made that decision in the past. However, that decision you made became established lore. It became established lore. That's like adding like a fucking extra character to the Fellowship because nobody was buying the figurine. Right, you can't just do that, right? You can't change established lore of what happens in the story. And the same was true of the Adeptus Custodes until it wasn't. How about that? Though the customers at the average Warhammer shop are mostly men, these days there are usually one or two women as well. Have you seen them? Women, eh? And the men are a lot less likely to throw a hissy fit about having women in their armies than gamers in the 1980s, despite what Reddit and Twitter might suggest. All of 40k's lore and storytelling is this to provide context for selling toy soldiers to people, and as the customer base changes, so too will that lore. Now, again, you already included women, right? I'm going over the same points again. You already included women. You brought them in. They were there. They existed, right? The sororitas. You brought them all in. You've got the nuns with guns. I really like the nuns with guns, right? I'm sorry. I enjoy them. So you've got all of them in there, right? Again, we've already went over the reason why you did this, right? It was virtue signaling bullshit. That's what it was. You were bringing it in, here, look how progressive we are. And that was the reason you did it. That's why we have a problem. But of course, you know, when it comes to like video game journalism, nothing at all has changed since Gamergate. Right, that none of them care about telling the truth anymore. You know, that we learned that back in 2014. Right, these are the guys that still bitch about Gamergate, you know, reliving the war they lost, like the fucking South, playing those reenactments all the time. The feminists will rise again. And all that stuff, man. You lost, fucking get over it. Right, but again, we've been over the reasons. This wasn't done for a storytelling narrative or for any other positive reason to, like, affect the lore. It was done as a virtue signal. That's the problem. And it's like, the lore is fluid. Yes, absolutely, some of the lore is fluid. Some of it is not. Right? The Adeptus Custodes have always been men. This is written in established lore. Grums has already been tweeting out, yeah, here's this, here's this, here's this, here's this, here's this, here's all the evidence going all the way back to the fucking 90s that the Adeptus Custodes have always been men. Right, and and then Yusuf just came out and went, and actually some of them are women. Is it right? Woo! Here comes the girls with their fucking thigh-high stocks and fucking chin fuzz, coming in with their fucking badly painted fucking Tyranids because they're little scrubs that don't know how to play the game. But anyway, right, it's just nonsense, right? So everybody's going, the neckbeards are furious, like. I'd be furious if there was a hobby I was deeply passionate about that had established lore, and then people just changed the lore, because then what's the point in changing what's the point in learning the lore if you're just going to change it a year down the line? And it's like fucking, oh, do I want to read about the Horus Heresy? I mean, why the fuck should I? Because in 2 years it might be completely fucking different. You know, maybe Horus was a fucking trans-Muslim or some shit like that, because that fucking has been flung in there. Horus was bi, actually. Horus was actually always, like, bisexual. Like, there's nonsense, right? So, basically, what you've done is you've shown that the entirety of the lore is fluid. So, what's the point in anyone learning the lore or even taking an interest in the hobby?